You have the eye for human weakness, but not the stomach.
What's this about?
Oh, just a feeling I have.
Ouch. When you get those feelings, insurance companies start to go bankrupt.
What kind of music do you usually have here?
Oh, we got both kinds. We got country and western.
Are you the police?
No, ma'am. We're musicians.
Top news stories of the week. Time to find out once again with Megan Olson and News of the Week on The Al Travis Show.
Well, this should be interesting. Has there been anything to talk about in the last week? We'll find out. Megan's news in review. My gosh, Megan, we said it last week how it started, and here we are, even worse.
Yeah, and I'll admit, I know last week we talked a lot about the governor's race with Walz dropping out, and I put my foot down and I said, mark my words, Al, next week we're going to be talking about Amy Klobuchar running for governor. Unfortunately, that prediction did not come true. I think the news cycle did kind of take a turn. We're talking a lot now about DHS and ICE here in Minnesota, and we have this killing of a 37-year-old woman in Minneapolis, and I think that might have changed Klobuchar.
Let me ask you this real quick, Klobuchar. With the amount of investigative people, I don't know if you want to, whatever these people are with their phones, the independent journalists, with the amount of spotlight on Minnesota, I gotta think that's got to make Amy, we're tight, Senator Klobuchar, think twice about wanting to get in. You know what I'm saying? I have nothing to say she's connected to any of this and all that and the rest. But you tell me they're not going to scour every last donation. And you know what I'm saying? You could sit where you're sitting, be a senator for another couple of years, want to get after that, probably got it. If she were to jump into this, that spotlight is hard. Would you agree with me? And otherwise, I think you said we'd have here by now.
The spotlight, I think, is hard, particularly right now, is because it's the national spotlight that's on Minnesota. Yes. And really, these candidates that are in the background, maybe haven't announced yet, they have to do a lot of strategy and figuring out, well, when is the best time for us to hop in? Because then you have things happen that dominate the news cycle. And, throughout this last week, we have Minnesota legislators being flown out to Washington, D.C. to testify in front of the House Oversight Committee. But we're not talking about that because we have other big things that are happening. So really, candidates have to be strategic in this day and age with Minnesota being elevated to the...
That is a great point. She jumps into the race, says, I'm going to go for governor. And later in the afternoon, some knucklehead gets beat up by an ICE guy, and the national news is the ICE guy, and your announcement doesn't even get talked about. That's a great point.
Yeah.
You wait for a little calmer moment. I don't know when that's going to be in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Did you see in the news yesterday? I actually watched this. The AG and the mayor coming out and doing their report on their news conference on why they're suing the state government to stop ICE. Did you watch that? I don't know. You live in the cities. I do not. And I'm just going to do some numbers game for me. So I'll throw it at you like this. Supposedly they've gotten 1,500 bad guys out of Minneapolis this year. They've been running about 1,600 every year, but now this year they got about 1,500. And 2,000 or so ICE guys to get them. When I do the math, it's like, if Ellison got his way and they booted all the ICE guys out, do you want 1,500 bad hombres in your city? You know what I'm saying? I guess.
Well, and
I'm not saying it's great the ICE is there, but they're there to get the bad guys, and I'd rather have good guys with guns getting the bad guys out than just the bad guys.
Well, and it's a delicate situation, conversation. I think a lot of people are fired up, and I say in air quotes on both sides. I think both things can be true, that one, illegal immigration is a problem and there needs to be kind of, due process in that space. And we need to make sure that people are here legally. But at the same time, the masks and the behavior of ICE and kind of coming in, and I see it kind of from like a local control, federal government push and pull. Both of those things can be true, but it really comes down to, ICE is coming into these communities, not corresponding with local law enforcement, which makes a really tough situation for people like Minneapolis Police Department that have been walking on eggshells since 2020, and now they're being painted as the bad guy. I mean, we had the Minneapolis police chief that had to basically plead with a local senator and say, can you call people off of us because we're not a part of this? We don't enforce federal laws. So really, this is a weird situation.
But this is where you got to take a step back. I probably show my card to you. Take a step back. before you were a sanctuary city, we were getting, again, during the last 4 years, is roughly about 1,500 on average. It's about 6,000 people got kicked out of Minneapolis in the 4 years before Orange Man showed up, right? And then ICE agents could come in. You know, when we arrested bad guy for speeding, he has a detainer, let ICE take him out. No one was whining. No one was complaining. Now when Minneapolis says our police officers are not going to help ICE, what happens then? ICE has to bring twice as many people so somebody can stand guard to make sure their ICE guys are doing their job. And now it looks big and bad because there's more ICE guys. Well, if we, Minneapolis, went back and said, okay, our job, we're not going to go out there and enforce, bring the guns along with the neighborhood. We're not doing that. But if we catch a bad guy and he's in, we'll call you and you have the 48 hours or whatever every other system does. You know what then? Now there's the 1,500 guys are getting out with none of this chance of shooting bystanders in the street. You know what I'm saying? You can't say we're not helping you or we're not helping you and then complain that you don't come to me and ask for help.
Well, and that's the weird thing about this lawsuit is, okay, so we have Ellison and Minneapolis Mayor, St. Paul Mayor suing the Trump administration for, ICE doing this in the Twin Cities. They're saying that it violates the 10th Amendment of the Constitution by kind of butting into Minnesota's right to police itself. So they want it to be more, let's work together. But then they don't want that at the same time, that's what I'm saying. That weird, tricky. How does that even work in real time? But I think the lawsuit is somewhat legitimate.
Well, I think the separations clause is going to blow it out of the water. Yeah. The federal agents doing federal things, unless they're breaking the federal law, then Minnesota can't say much. I think the separations is going to be there, but I get their point. But my point is, you can't say we're not going to help you and then complain when you're not asked for help. You're not keeping us involved. If you're not going to come help us with police, this is my one. And again, for this poor gal that got shot, if the Minneapolis police or these state troopers were there, like they do in other states, they were there. That traffic incident where a gal is parked parallel in the road would have been an Minneapolis Police Department and or state trooper thing to clear, not ICE agent whose job isn't to clear roads. But you know what I'm saying? When you then pull out and then say, but you guys did it wrong, you got to take a look at yourself. And again, you don't have to want them there. I get that. But then what do you want there? And my point is, go back the way it was when Biden was in charge. Great, come in. Well, you can come pick up your people. When we collect them for jaywalking, we realize they're murderers. You can pick them up. We don't do that currently. And then you get it's the start. I don't want to.
Well, and I've tried to dig into the data too and figuring out the numbers, which is incredibly difficult because you have ICE that hasn't reported a full set of numbers since I think September or October of 2025. So we don't really know. But then you have Ellison at this press conference saying that Minnesota's non-citizen immigrant population is 1.5%, so half of the national average. Where does that number come from? How do we know that? I just have a lot of questions. I just want to know. I want facts. I want unbiased information. And on this issue, it is really hard.
See, and it is hard, but he says that 1.5% of Minnesotans are non-citizens. Okay, isn't that a strikingly large number? That 1 out of every 100 isn't here legally? I'm like, why not?
Yeah. And part of if you told me one driver's license thing, because we have driver's licenses for illegal immigrants, I don't know.
But that's my point is that's a strikingly large number. If 1 in 100 people were bank robbers, I'd be like, what? Really? You'd be stunned. If one in 100 people would pick the crime, I'm like, that's a lot.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what that percentage is for other crimes.
Thank you for playing along. But when he said that, I thought the same thing. I don't know how in the world you prove who's not here legally. I mean, they're not signing legal, illegal, sign my name over here. I don't know how they do that. Anyway, but that was a strikingly large number. I've got to go to break. I know we spent too much time on this. You've got much more to talk about. We'll do it after this. It's Megan's News in Review.
Braver Angels Minnesota is part of a national movement that brings together conservatives, liberals, independents, and others to restore trust, respect, and goodwill in politics. We seek not to eliminate our differences, but rather deal with them head on, with respect and understanding. We do not try to change people's views, but how they view the other side. There will always be differences. Braver Angels Minnesota believes the best way forward is to change how we deal with those differences. Join the civil conversation at mn.braverangels.org.
There's never a good time for car trouble, especially when you've got places to be. Whether it's a mysterious rattle under the hood or just time for that routine oil change, you need a mechanic you can trust. That's where Jay's Auto in Blue Earth comes in. From strange noises to engine diagnostics, Jay and his team provide honest service at a fair price. They're proud to keep their neighbors on the road safely season after season. Don't wait for a breakdown. Stop at Jay's Auto today or call 525-1052.
The Al Travis Show, the last place you can go and hear all sides. Respectful, thoughtful, and grateful.
We've got our Megan's News Review. Megan, the governor's race is being overshadowed in all of this. I don't know if you saw it. And they're up in Morris County, I think, 10 of the 15 Republican governors. Here's the game. Take that picture and say which ones you can name by looking at them. I think I got 7 out of 10 right. I do. I honestly think I got 7 out of 10, but it got really weak after that. Your thought, you brought it up a little bit earlier about Walz and getting out of the race and whether Amy would get in. Amy, we're tight. Senator Klobuchar. Is she still the front runner in your mind? Because now you got Ellison, who has been out front. Now he's going to say, it's just my job. But you know he wants that governor's job. If Senator Klobuchar says no, wouldn't he be front and center?
I think those two names are probably the front runners and the conversations happening behind the scenes. It's weird. We're 10 months out from the election and we don't have a Democrat candidate, but the reality is it's still an uphill battle for whoever the Republican nominee is. No matter who they're running against, it is an uphill battle for Republicans. And I want to touch briefly, too, on another straw poll. I know we talked about a straw poll from a couple weeks or months back that had Qualls in the lead, but another one out of Goodhue County also has him in the lead. And you have Chris Medell finishing second and then Mike Lindell in third. So interesting to see that consistency for Qualls, but then Chris Medell coming out of nowhere. As it seems. Yeah.
And I had heard his name, but I really don't know a whole lot about him. I'm under the impression he's very middle of the road, if you will. He's not a right-wing
Which maybe that's what we need, yeah.
Maybe. And again, I'm not putting my vote anywhere right now, but I found that interesting as well. That, I think, was it Goodhue County? It was Goodhue County. The other one was the state group, so I don't know.
MNGOP,
maybe
yeah.
All right. So with all of that being said, where do we go from here? Like you say, it's 10 months out. And you even said, by the way, which is right on, but scary, 10 months out, no Democratic gubernatorial candidate, and you're still saying it's an uphill battle no matter who the Republican is?
Mm-hmm.
Are you
think-
just the
I think
underdog
that's
lover? You
because-
just
Yeah, I think it's because when Walz got out, the fraud issue, still an issue, but it's harder for Republicans to convey because they're not running against the very person who was kind of the head of the state when all of this unfolded. And I think there's a lot of regret in Republican circles right now of forcing Walz out and forcing him to say, I'm not going to run again, a little bit too early because they weren't able to effectively mobilize on the fraud issue closer to the election when people are actually thinking about, oh, who am I going to vote for?
I think this
it
still
just puts them
goes.
in a tough spot.
Is there any coattails to it, though? Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, should she say, I want to be the governor, obviously that would tie her instantly to it, right? You were there during the meetings, I presume. So I don't think she wants to do that. But almost every other Democrat who is a senator or representative has some tails in all this, right? I mean, they've been in charge for whatever it's been, 30 years, 20 years. So that's going to hold them down. Maybe you can't hold Simon. Maybe you can't hold Ellison to it. You know what I'm saying? Maybe there's some that are not, but aren't most of them by association, I guess is my point, which is kind of a horrible thing to say, but guilty by association?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely we know the fraud issue isn't going anywhere. Just this last week, kind of tucked into the crazy news cycle of the last week, we have the USDA saying, oh, we're going to stop $129 million in payments to Minnesota. So for, I think, active and future awards, those are being paused, $129 million. That was kind of snuck in here this last week. And then I mentioned before, also snuck in is you have State Representative Kristen Robbins, I believe Representative Walter Hudson, and Marion Rarick going out to DC, testifying in the House Oversight Committee about this fraud stuff and really revisiting this topic of, well, there were alarm bells for feeding our future. And then a lawsuit was threatened saying, you know, this is racist, you can't do this. The payments were paused at that point, but then resumed because of this lawsuit.
See, I
and I totally
thought,
forgot about that in all of this.
Yeah. And what's funny about it is now we are suing. We're one of, I think, 20 states that are suing the federal government so they can't turn off the spigot, right? That you can't turn these things off. And I'm like, wait a minute. Didn't 2 weeks ago our governor turn off the spigot to
For
all
certain programs? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wait a minute. You're saying you can do it, but he can't do it. But it's, and I say that it's his money, the federal government money. Maybe I'm missing how all this works, but it seems like both sides of the coin is what you're looking for. We turned it off because I'm against
the
fraud.
Weird kind of legal gray space, and it goes back to, you know, suing, you know, federal government for the ICE stuff and separation of powers and what rights do the states have that federal government doesn't and vice versa. Like that's all a part of the same conversation. But yeah, it does seem to be a little bit of hypocrisy here and there when you break it down that way. But
I'm just a knucklehead, just like the governor. We're both knuckleheads. I started that word, by the way. My dad used to call me it all the time. We're knuckleheads. But I literally just remember it was like a month ago. He came out, the governor, and said, I'm pausing everything for this program until we get a 90-day pause. And he wanted accolades for it. And a month later, Trump says, we're pausing this. This is Crazyville over there. And we sued him. Like, I have a tough time, Megan. I really do. We didn't get time to get to it, but we will. Hopefully, if you remember next week, if it's got to still be up there. I want to talk about it. But we might have the ability to find out how high you are in cars when you're driving. And I know this affects all you gummy berry eating kids of your age group. This ain't going to affect me any, but is that really something we figured out 2.5 years after we applied the law?
You and I talked about this on the show probably right around this time last year, and they were doing a little tester, law enforcement agencies this last year, and it sounds like results are coming back pretty promising for roadside saliva tests, similar to a breathalyzer test, and sounds like public safety officials might be courting the legislature to get the consent to go ahead and roll that out across the state.
All right, we'll talk about that, I'm sure, next week. Thanks, Megan. Get you back here next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. We'll be back next week to talk about the top Minnesota news stories on the Al Travis Show with Megan's News and Review.